What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be doing the review of the TYR CXT-2s. Alright, so a few weeks ago I did my first impressions video on the CXT-2s, and in that video I talked about the construction, the build quality, how they felt right out of the box, but I didn't talk about performance because I had only had the shoe for a day. If you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend that you check that out before you watch today's video, because today we're mainly going to be focused on the performance of the CXT-2s and how it's been like to work out in these shoes over the last 3 weeks or so. But first off, I'm going to switch to a pair that I've actually worked out in. The Matador Reds were my favorite colorway from the launch. It's such a pretty shade of red that I've been kind of shy about getting these ones dirty and beating them up. But I haven't been shy about beating up the Black and Gums and the White and Limes. The Black and Gums have been my rope climb shoe. I've done about 15 to 20 rope climbs or so, and I've done just about everything else in the White and Limes, and they've held up beautifully. The White actually does a pretty good job in staying clean. I've used these for like burpees, wall walks, pretty much everything that could get a shoe dirty. And while admittedly I have wiped them down, I just take a baby wipe and I just wipe them off. They still look pretty good. There's a little bit of discoloration on the laces, obviously, because my hands get dirty. I'm switching my shoes in and out. Another thing that I noticed pretty early on was that the dye from the black liner does get on the laces, and then it stains the tongue a bit. I don't know if you could see it there, but that was a little bit annoying early on. It's a small annoyance, but it's there. Otherwise, the engineered mesh is looking really good. It's very comfortable, and I would say that it's broken in a little bit over the last 3 weeks, but not a ton. And that was one of the things that I said was questionable early on, was the actual like width of the shoe. I didn't feel that it was that much wider or wider at all than the CXT-1s, and I still feel that way about the shoes. So if you get them and you wear them and you expect them to get wider as you wear them in, don't expect a huge change in terms of width. I still don't think that these are as wide as people were looking for, but for me personally, I think the width is appropriate. It holds your foot in place. They're still plenty comfortable to work out in, but they're just not particularly wide shoes or have a ton of space in the toe box. Let's take a look at the black pair and see how this one has fared. Obviously, this is the rope climb shoe. You can't really see the dirt from the rope, but the engineered mesh looks perfect. It doesn't look like there's a single scratch on it. There is a little bit of wear on the eye stays where the overlay is. It's kind of burnt down a little bit, but that's not really that big a deal. And then there's a little bit of rubbing on the TPU stability wrap, really not that major on this shoe, which is the right shoe, and that's where I place the rope when I do my rope climbs. On the rubber, there's a little bit of wear, but it's, once again, it's not a major deal, especially in comparison to the CXT-1s, where one rope climb would delaminate the rubber from the outs or from the shoe. Let's take a look at the other shoe, the left shoe, and this one has maybe a little bit more rubbing on the stability wrap, so you can see it. It's a little bit like discolored in that area, and there's a little bit of burn on the eye stay there, but nothing major. And I think that it's a huge upgrade in terms of a rope climb shoe compared to the CXT-1s. On that same point, the grip is excellent while you're doing rope climbs. It's so good that the rope kind of wants to go up with you when you're doing your rope climbs, and then when you're doing your descents, it's a little bit tricky because the rope doesn't want to easily slide through your feet, not as much as other shoes, but I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have great grip going up the rope, and you're still gonna have that grip going down the rope as well. But all in all, I would say that these are one of the better, or if not the best, rope climb shoe on the market right now. Okay, let's switch back to the Lime pair and let's take a look around the shoe. Other than that, really nothing I can comment about. I did some handstand push-ups. There's maybe a little bit of discoloration at the back heel clip area, but really nothing that stands out in terms of durability. If we're looking at the outsoles here, which the outsole is that TYR rubber outsole, which is excellent. The grip on these shoes, compared to other training shoes, it's unbeatable. Let's see, we've got a little bit of smoothing out at the heel on the white shoe. Nothing too alarming. I don't think that the actual grip is gonna go bad anytime soon. Plus the grooves are still intact, so you're not gonna have to worry about that. But yeah, the grip on the CXTs is one of the main standout things. Another thing is the flat profile, which these shoes have barely any kind of toe spring or heel rocker there. I mean, there's a slight heel rocker, but it's barely even there. And that's one of the things that I like about the CXTs so much. And we'll talk about that in depth when we go over the lifting aspect of the shoes. When it comes to sizing your CXTs, I'm gonna still recommend that you go with your normal training shoe size. If you are somebody that is coming from the CXT-1s and you had to size those up to get a little bit more width out of them, you're probably gonna have to do the same thing with CXT-2s because these aren't really any wider. They actually probably fit shorter than the CXT-1s. I could get into a size 10 in my CXT-1s, but I sized up to a 10.5 for the CXT-1s to get just a little bit more space in the toe box. The CXT-2s fit shorter in the 10.5. The width is probably about the same as the CXT-1s in a size 10.5. So they fit me better because I don't have excess length. The width isn't really all that different, but it's worth noting that they are not like a really wide shoe. If you wanted something that was really wide, then I would say you probably want to go with the CXT-1 wides, which were enormous on me in a size 10.5. The break-in, like I said before, didn't really change the fit all that much. It's maybe a little bit more relaxed around the metatarsals, but it's still not a super wide shoe, so don't expect them to break in and magically be super comfortable. They just get a little bit more comfortable. I'd say the area that you're gonna notice the width the most is probably at like the front end of the toe box, where it's just a little bit more anatomically shaped. It's not quite as pointy as the CXT-1s, so you can see it there. It's probably like right here is where the width comes in on the CXT-2s. But otherwise, yeah, the width it's really similar comparing the two models. Another thing that I really like about the CXTs in terms of fit, and I guess this is just general wearability, is I like to wear them loose like so, like unlaced. Right after I'm done working out, I kind of just always do this. I pull the laces out and the laces stay pretty well. And it becomes a nice, easy slip-on shoe that stays on actually pretty decently well because of the enhanced cushioning in the ankle collar and tongue. That high density cushioning there is really comfortable and it hugs your ankle. That's one of the best features of the CXT-2. Hasn't really worn down, hasn't really flattened out at all. So I expect that to stay consistent through a pretty decent amount of wear with your CXTs. All right, so now moving on to probably the weakest area of the CXT-2s, and that is how they run. These are not great running shoes. They're completely usable. I actually use them while I was doing just a pure running workout, and I thought that they were okay. They didn't make me want to like cut my feet off or anything. There's obviously not that much cushioning, and the cushioning that is there is not soft at all. It's adequate and it absorbs impact well, but these are not made for running. They have a very flat profile, so they do feel like they're clunky. The heel is not super duper flexible, and that is due to the TPU stability wrap being there. It just doesn't want to flex all that much, but it does want to kind of pop the shoe back into place. So you can kind of get a little bit more response from like jamming your heel into the ground and moving forward. But if you're like a forefoot striker, midfoot striker like me, running in these is not going to be good. And they know that like these shoes are just, they're made for in the box stuff, and they're going to be acceptable for lighter runs. Where I thought that they did a better job than I initially had expected them to do was like things like burpees and double unders. Because of the grip that you have in the forefoot, burpees just popping back up to your feet is excellent. You've got the extended toe bumper there, so you can just really just jam your foot into the ground and pop back up onto your feet. And it's never all that fatiguing. The cushioning, like I said, is adequate. It's not a lot. It's not soft. But it's also not like fatiguing to wear these for multiple bounding movements. And the same thing goes with like double unders. The forefoot has enough flexibility to never really get in the way, never really light your feet up when you're doing multiple, like longer sets of double unders. And tracking the rope was very easy to do in these shoes because they're so responsive. Where I noticed the difference in weight the most was during box jumps, though I didn't think it was also that detrimental. I just noticed it because I'm sensitive to these things. And it really came into play when I was doing box jump overs. The weight mixed in with the flat profile and probably the grip to some extent made these shoes feel a little bit cumbersome to get up and over the box. The response was great. Takeoffs were great. It was just the kind of shifting, pivoting movement, getting on to the other side of the box. And doing that multiple times when you're kind of tired, you can really notice the weight of these shoes. It's not going to stop you from doing it. So if you're like in a competition and you're just gunning it, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you're sensitive or if you're used to lighter shoes, then you're going to notice the increased weight of the CXT-2s. I was expecting to hate using these for bodyweight stuff, running, gymnastics, where I typically would take a lighter shoe. I actually didn't mind it so much in the CXT-2, so that was pretty surprising to me. Now, when it came to lifting, these shoes were the shoe that I would want to reach for every single time. There's no question in my mind. These are my favorite training shoe to lift in. And that's for a few different reasons. The first one being the flat contact area that is also very wide. Ground feel and ground contact on these shoes is unmatched compared to pretty much anything else out there. There is relatively no toe spring angle. The heel is very flat contact, and you can feel it when you're getting set up on the barbell. You can feel your feet getting full foot contact. Certain shoes, I'll have to kind of rock myself back and forth to kind of find my footing. With the CXT-2s, I'm like always planted. My feet are sure every single time I approach the barbell. And while the 7mm drop is not ideal for deadlifting, I didn't notice that higher heel really being that much of a detriment. What I did notice is just how much ground contact I got with the ground when I would set up. The ground contact also translates into things like Olympic weightlifting. When you're landing, these shoes get stuck to the ground. Like, it's pretty crazy how planted you feel when you land in the CXT-2s. You rarely find yourself, or I rarely found myself, like rocking back, getting on my toes. I almost always felt like I landed in the perfect spot with the CXT-2s. They really suck you down into the ground. The grip on these shoes is excellent. Like, some of these Powerlifting shoes have really good grip nowadays. And the CXT-2s pretty much rival just about everything out there in terms of grip. When it came to power delivery, these shoes are never lacking. They have the Surge NRG foam midsole, and it's got a fairly low stack height. I want to say that they feel pretty similar in height to like the Strike Haze. Definitely not as high as the Reds, for sure not as soft as Reds, but still fairly comfortable. I think they absorb impact well without detracting from the actual like power delivery and responsiveness. Going through and testing all of my favorite shoes, I always landed on the CXTs being the ones that I would want to finish out my sessions with. Typically, I'll switch through all of my shoes back to back to back and back to back to back. I'll do it a few times, but I always wanted to keep the CXT-2s on because how sure I felt lifting in them. And they're going up against some really tough competition. Shoes that I've historically, at least over the last couple of years, have chosen as my favorite shoes. So that says a lot about the TYRs being the best lifting shoe on the market right now. Okay, so if you're looking at the CXT-2s and you're coming from the CXT-1s, you have to kind of ask yourself what you are lacking. For me, it's a no-brainer. I prefer the CXT-2s because I just was not a huge fan of lifting in the CXT-1s. The width was never really that big a deal, but I didn't like the 9mm drop of the CXT-1s, and the CXT-2s with their 7mm drop, though it sounds like a small difference, it is more noticeable in the way that the shoe is pitched. I felt like these felt flatter overall, and whatever they lack in flexibility, they more than make up in the stability department. So if you wanted the more flexible shoe, you probably want to stay with your CXT-1s, but if you wanted the better, I guess, all-around CrossFit shoe, I would go with the CXT-2s. If you're somebody that is coming from something like the Strike Haze or Rad, which are more flexible than the CXT-2s, you have to ask yourself once again, do you want something that is better for lifting, but doesn't necessarily sacrifice much in terms of the being able to do lighter weight Metcon stuff? Like if you had a workout that had a bunch of burpees mixed in with a heavy barbell, then I would say that the CXT-2s might actually be better than the Rad or Strike. It really just kind of depends on how the workout leans. If it's something that's lighter weight, I would probably still take the Rads and the Strike Haze. But if you had a really heavy barbell in there and you had then some bodyweight movements, I wouldn't mind picking the CXT-2s because I think they do well with agility stuff and they move a barbell really well. The last thing I want to reiterate with the CXT-2s is just how wearable these shoes are. Like, I really love just undoing the laces like this, pulling them out, pulling the tongue out, and then just wearing them as kind of like a slip-on shoe. The cushioning around the ankle collar, I can't overstate enough, is so comfortable. And then wearing these just feels like a skate shoe. It feels like it brings me back to the days of being in high school and wearing like DVSs and Etnies and just having a wide, just really comfortable shoe that had a huge fat tongue. So there's that nostalgia there for me, but they really are comfortable and wearable. I can wear these all day long coaching and not even think about taking them off. I do think the breathability could be a little bit better with them, but it's like 100 degrees right now in Southern California, and it really hasn't bothered me that much. So for $150, I think that the CXT-2s are one of the best training shoes on the market right now. It's gonna be a hard way to spend your money when you're looking at that price point, but if you're looking for a shoe that can move a barbell better than anything else, then I think the CXT-2s are gonna be the shoe for you. If you guys have any questions about these shoes, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.